Of course, the Rockies came through. Then the Yankees finished up this homestand. So a big 9-game homestand up here in Toronto.
Yeah, they got a late start to their home opening slate of games, so they're finally getting in gear. And we're going to be talking a lot about the American League East in general, all of those teams that you and I have both kind of laid our eyes on here early part of the season. And some statistics that may be lying about certain players around the game, whether you can believe them, whether you cannot, lucky, unlucky, whatever it may be. But let's get things started with a guy you did just get to see several days in a row. American League MVP. Who are the names leading the way? And it seems like there's two, Juan Soto and Mike Trout. What did you see from Juan Soto this week against the Blue Jays in Toronto?
Got to be honest with you. I mean, Juan Soto looked every bit like the guy the Bronx Bombers wanted to bring in whenever they pulled off that trade that you and I were at winter meetings. Remember whenever all that started breaking? And it feels like this is a different Yankees team. Yes, I know it's early and everything else, but I will tell you, after the game in the clubhouse, they came back, had 4 runs in the 9th inning to earn the win today, keep Toronto from sweeping them. Soto played a big part in that. And I'll tell you, there's just a vibe in that clubhouse. They believe that they've got the weapons to be good this year, and not just good, but like scary good. And part of that is Soto. Over the last 7 games, man, I tell you what, he is 360, 515, 680, 2 homers, 6 RBIs. But here's the thing for me, and it showed up again today, 8 walks. We always talk about Soto being this walk machine. But I will tell you, it's really, he's just kept that going in the American League with the Yankees, and it's really starting to have those ripple effects with the rest of the lineup. That's one of the things that Aaron Boone was talking about today, is how other guys are seeing Juan Soto's approach at the plate, and it's kind of impacting what they do whenever they step up there as well.
I don't want to call the Yankees clubhouse stale, but they definitely have needed this extra oomph. They needed somewhat of a catalyst, and Soto definitely appears to be giving that to them, right? That's one of those intangibles that you can't really have a statistic that will compute, the value of that when you're talking about the most valuable player with a team like the Yankees. And it really seems like it's becoming less of Aaron Judge's team. And I don't want to go ahead and say it's Juan Soto's team just yet, but you look with the younger contingency with Alex Verdugo, still yet to be 28 years old, bringing a different kind of swagger. Oswaldo Cabrera, just a little bit younger, barely younger than Juan Soto himself. And then Anthony Volpe now hitting at the top of that lineup, playing shortstop, really taking a big step forward. And it does seem almost like somewhat of a youth movement, at least in the lineup in general. And again, Juan Soto has been a major part of that at the top of the lineup.
And I'm glad you brought up Volpe, because I will tell you, if you watch the game today, he made a play in the 9th that actually made sure that the Blue Jays didn't earn that sweep. And it was, a defensive play. So we're talking a lot about what the Bombers are doing at the plate right now. But I'm going to tell you as well, they're doing really well on defense too. And again, the swagger is there. I'm going to tell you, it absolutely is. And I wasn't sure until I spent these last 3 days with them, but you can tell there's a belief that they're going to be somebody to deal with. We're going to talk Orioles and everything else, I know, shortly, but let's not overlook the Yankees.
I'm working on something right now about Mookie Betts possibly being this runaway MVP candidate in the National League. And I think it helps that Ohtani is hitting behind him, so he's benefiting from that. I think as Anthony Volpe continues to have that kind of growth at the top of the order, you're going to look and say, well, what's the reason for that? It's Juan Soto. So he's been, integral in that early start, 13-6 in that very, very competitive American League East. Let's divert our attention to another East guy, not American League East. He plays in the AL West, but he's from New Jersey. Grew up as a Phillies fan in New Jersey. People probably don't realize that New Jersey also touches Pennsylvania, and there's a whole other Philadelphia half of New Jersey. But Mike Trout, in a year in which everyone was ready to say, you know what, it's definitely not Mike Trout when we talk about the best players in the game right now. Sure, maybe if he's healthy, he's back into the conversation, but it's time for somebody else to take the crown. And just as soon as we're ready to anoint the next player, Mike Trout says, hold on a second, I'm not done yet.
Whenever you and I were talking about this show earlier today, and we were talking about this, Soto versus Trout thing, my first thought was, you know what? I mean, Soto's got all these weapons around him. Well, what does Trout really have? But if you look, hey, Anthony Rendon has discovered something. There's no doubt about that. Taylor Ward, is doing some things out there for the Angels as well. So Trout is carrying the load, but absolutely he's not the only one carrying the load for the Angels. And I think that that's something that may be a little bit of an early storyline for sure out in LA.
Yeah, with his 8 home runs, which leads the American League as of Wednesday when we're recording this. Marcell Ozuna also has 8 over in the National League, but it's a lighter lineup, and you know that because despite the fact he has 8 home runs, 2 triples, only has 11 RBI. So there's not too many guys that are on base. That maybe that's one of the reasons why pitchers are deciding to throw him something worth hitting. He worked a lot this offseason in getting around on those fastballs up in the zone, which had kind of been plaguing him a little bit, and is back to being that player, which is only going to fuel the rumors as to whether or not he's going to be around with the Angels much longer after this summer's trade deadline.
The unfortunate thing with Trout is you've also got to start thinking about, when is that injury going to happen? And certainly let's knock on some wood. Let's make sure we're not talking to the baseball gods about that. But it's just been something for him like a Byron Buxton in recent years. He just can't get through a season healthy. So here's hoping that actually does happen this year.
Over his last 7 games, 267, 333, 567 slash line, also 2 homers like Soto. But again, only 3 RBI, 3 walks, 8 strikeouts. So he is having some troubles putting the ball in the play when compared with Soto. But I think it really is going to be down to these 2 guys. Still plenty of season left, and we know how much September can factor into those MVP conversations. I think the thing that makes it probably most difficult for Trout to really be able to hang with Soto or some other guys over the course of this season is the fact that the Angels just aren't going to be contenders. At least it doesn't really seem to be, despite the really solid play, as you said, from a Rendon. A lot of their pitchers too. We'll get to some of those guys that have been pitching really well for an Angel staff who's been hanging around in the AOS. But if you're on a losing team and if you're just not into a contender, if you're not getting into that postseason, you really just have to be so far ahead and shoulders above the rest of the players in your division. And that's an uphill battle that Trout's going to have to deal with, I think.
Yeah, the days of Andre Dawson winning the MVP playing for the Cubs, those are long gone, my friend. So I do think that it's the lights will shine on the Bronx. And if the Yankees are right there in the postseason and if Soto keeps this up, I will tell you, not only will it be a good thing for him in terms of MVP this year, but just think about what that contract's going to be. Just think about what the bidding war is going to be like this offseason and where he might land and what kind of money he could bring in.
The childish Bambino, which is his nickname. It might just have to be the Bronx Bambino. We'll see if that gets updated at some point. And here I am saying this about Mike Trout, and yet, as you mentioned, Andre Dawson, for the 1987 Cubs winning the MVP, despite how bad they were. The last 4 times a player on a losing team won the MVP, they were all in the American League, and they were all with the Los Angeles Angels. You got Shohei Ohtani, once in a 100-year talent, and a young Mike Trout, who was, is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Let's talk about the American League East, where we've seen a lot of these teams in action over the last week plus. It's the only division right now in baseball on Wednesday with 4 teams with 10 or more wins, and then you've got the 5th in action right now in the Boston Red Sox at 9-9, playing a little bit over their heads. But we knew this was going to be a competitive division. We know how much talent is there. We know how much the teams that might not have the talent on paper, how capable they are of playing over their heads, either because of the front office and the proper buttons that they push and finding players that are maybe disregarded by other teams, getting those diamonds in the rough, or just putting on a jersey and magically playing better. Let's talk about some of the numbers or some of the things that maybe people aren't discussing about right now in regards to these teams. And right off the bat, it has to be the Baltimore Orioles for, just how much power they're getting up and down their lineup. They get the leadoff home run for Gunnar Henderson today, and they finish off a 3-game sweep of the Minnesota Twins in a game that they were trailing. They win 4-2, and they now have 5 consecutive games with 3 or more home runs by their players. It's tied for the second longest streak in MLB history since 1900. Who has the record? The Baltimore Orioles of 1987, who actually did it in 6 straight. So, Kevin, is their power legit? And on Friday against Alec Marsh of the Royals, do they have 3+ home runs in 6 consecutive games? Do you see that happening?
It's going to be a really good one to watch. And I will tell you, you mentioned the Twins getting swept. I love what the Royals are doing right now. That's a really fun team to watch. I know we're talking AL East, but you say Royals, and I get a little bit excited this time of year for sure. But, I think that Baltimore's deep enough that they're a team that I know a lot of us were just going to hand the AL East over to them because, sure, who else was going to match them? We didn't know how good the Yankees would really be. Would their pitching hold up, especially with Garrett Cole not being in there? But Baltimore's pretty special, and they really have a lot of things going, and they're so deep as well. You feel like that they could endure an injury or two and still find some people to plug and play and keep that going.
And you look at what Jackson Holliday has been able to do, or rather what he hasn't been able to do, struggling to really get himself going. But the Orioles don't need him to do that right now, right? He's been really strong defensively over at second base. So that's been a plus. So it's almost a perfect situation for him to be around these other guys. Also young, he'll figure it out, but they don't necessarily need him to at this point. They don't need to send him back down to Norfolk and maybe work on some things. We'll see if that actually happens, if the struggles are something to worry about. But it's such a great situation to have him come in. And then just as you can imagine, everybody starts to cool down. That's when Jackson Holliday's probably going to end up heating up. We'll see his first home run and maybe keep this streak alive.
What a luxury is that for the Orioles, that they don't have to put the pressure on this kid, that he can bloom whenever he needs to. He can contribute whenever he needs to, but it's not like the team has to have that right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. You also have in the American League East, the Toronto Blue Jays, which you just saw for a week, and they've been playing a lot better after some early struggles there. They're now over 500, 10-9 with the loss today, of course. And, in general, things are kind of trending upward for them, which was probably important for John Schneider, who, might have been on the hot seat because we know that the Blue Jays window of contention, it's starting to close up with both Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero approaching free agency.
Yeah, you get Jordan Romano and Eric Swanson both back in the bullpen. You get Danny Jansen back behind the plate along with Alejandro Kirk. And so this feels like a Blue Jays team that right now is actually complete. It was missing some pieces since the start of the year, and to get those 3 guys back during this Yankees series. And yes, while they surrendered the lead late today, by the way, they were 9-0 heading into today, even with those guys not in the bullpen in innings 7 or later when they had the lead. They were 9-0 so far this year. So today was the first time that they actually blew the lead. Romano was not available today. He closed out yesterday's game, so that may have had something to do with it. But anyway, you're exactly right. John Schneider, his mood as this week has gone along here in Toronto has gotten a little bit lighter because he knew that these reinforcements were coming back in, and it's just in time for them to head to San Diego for what's going to be a really interesting series out there with the Padres.
They've been getting some really strong pitching performances. Yariel Rodriguez making his debut, looking pretty solid there, the 27-year-old from Cuba. The one guy that you're probably most concerned with, who was, I considered him a Cy Young favorite. I thought maybe this would be that year where he puts it together. He's been struggling a little bit. Kevin Gausman, yeah. What have you seen from him so far?
Well, we started this trip here to Toronto with the Colorado Rockies just knocking Gausman all over the place. And Schneider talked about how aggressive the Rockies were against Gausman and that splitter. I did talk to Bud Black, the manager of the Rockies, about that, and he thought that that has something to do with the location as well of those pitches. Today it was a different kind of Gausman. The talk after the game was that the velocity seemed back for Gausman. Had a really strong outing today, so I think that what he did today against a really powerful Yankees lineup bodes well for kind of where he's trending now after kind of a tough start to the season.
They lose the game on Wednesday to the Yankees, who, as we just talked about, Juan Soto's heating up. It seems to be, as he goes, so do the Yankees. So they're feeling all right. They're doing strong. I'm sure a lot of Yankees fans would probably say Aaron Boone's on the hot seat. It's similar to a guy we know well in Colorado and Bud Black. It almost doesn't matter what the win-loss record is. Expectations are a certain way, and believe it or not, guys' jobs are safe despite maybe some disappointment. But the Yankees have a quiet confidence from what you've seen in the clubhouse. Is that right?
Yeah, I will tell you, walked in today before the game. They were on a 4-game losing streak heading into today. The vibes were immaculate in there, my friend. They had a nice bamboo candle going. The easy music was playing. It kind of felt like that they were just kind of, all right, well, it's early in the season, no big deal. And by the way, this is a team, and I was checking this out, they have not been swept in Toronto since 2016. So they kept that streak going today as well. But I really do think that it's about, we talked earlier, this top of the lineup has really been reinvigorated and reshaped with Soto coming in there, Volpe getting another year, and they are now 13-6, fourth time since 2000 that they've started 13-6 or better. So it's definitely a better start than the Yankees have had in a long time.
Finally, the Tampa Bay Rays and the Boston Red Sox. Who are you more concerned with, Tampa and their bullpen? Are they going to figure it out? Or Boston in general, is anyone going to stay healthy? Is Tyler O'Neill going to continue to be a world beater? Who are you more concerned about right now in the AL East?
On my side, I think it's Boston. I really do. I think Tampa, they will get the bullpen figured out. I also think that they'll have some kind of sneaky move if they can't in order to figure it out. But Boston, there's just too many holes to fill there, and you can't honestly expect O'Neill to keep mashing the ball the way that he has. But, like we talked about Trout earlier, is he able to carry that team? What about you?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. It's nice when a team like Boston, despite the fact that they are one of those evil empire teams, they're getting some of these surprise performances and winning ball games in general with a really strong starting rotation. But can you count on these, rather inexperienced starters in that rotation? They're good. I like what Cutter Crawford's been able to do. It's been fantastic. But how long can that last? Same thing. How long can Tyler O'Neill last? We'll talk about some of his numbers and if he's maybe getting lucky or playing over his head. And then with Tampa, sure, you look at their bullpen and say, yeah, I don't really know too many of these guys that are pitching poorly. You can say that in a good year. I don't know too many of these guys that are pitching so well, making this one of the best bullpens in the game. So that Tampa's going to find a way, right? You just have to have that trust that despite the fact that going into Wednesday's game, they had the worst bullpen according to Fangraphs, negative 1.1, 6.27 ERA for Tampa Bay Rays relievers. They're trying to find excuses. They can't quite figure it out. We saw Pete Fairbanks in Colorado saying, it's something about the baseball in general, and maybe that's true. But ultimately, I think they'll have more answers than questions here at some point in the season.
And me personally, if you're looking at that AL East gauntlet, I'm going to like Tampa Bay's chances of getting through those 3 teams that we've talked about previously a lot better than Boston's.
Let's talk about who's been better than their numbers. What stats can lie about a team or a player, and who's been unlucky. The last episode, Ryan and I were kind of talking about who got off to a bad start that maybe you're concerned about, or maybe you're convinced that this guy might be totally washed altogether. But there's a couple guys out there that are off to slow starts that they're a little bit better, or that they've been a little bit unlucky. For you, who would top that list as far as stats that might be lying a little bit about this player who's better than what we've seen so far?
Well, can we start with the reigning NL MVP, Ronald Acuna Jr.? For me, if you look at Acuna, I mean, decent start to the year, but at the same time, just hasn't had that power, hasn't had that stroke, and heading in today, 1 barrel in 45 batted balls so far this season. So you compare that 2.2% barrel rate early. And again, it's early, yes, absolutely, but 2.2% early this year versus 15.3% barrel rate last year. And that really stands out to me as somebody that just is not, he's a little bit off, but it's going to come. How about you?
Yeah, I'd have to say Nolan Jones in Colorado. His strikeout rate last year, strikeout percentage was at 30%, just underneath that. And right now he's at 38.5%. And, that's obviously troubling for a guy that you have to say, is this going to be a sophomore slump kind of season, which very well could be. But I think he'll be able to figure things out just a little bit in what will be his first full big season, because he didn't get called up until late May, or rather didn't get the opportunity to play. Had the 20 homers, 20 stolen bases, 19 outfield assists. So this is a player that at some point will be able to click, as really the entire team for the Rockies have been pressing in a major way. Are they that bad? Are they a 4-15 club? Probably not over the course of an entire season, but look, are they one of the worst teams in the National League? Yes. Is Nolan Jones one of the worst hitters in the National League? Absolutely not. I don't think that lines up. Same thing with Francisco Lindor, a guy whose numbers are always there once you get to the end of the season. He's struggling, but he's going to figure out a couple things.
Absolutely. If you look at his expected batting average right now, it's 272, real batting average coming in at 145. So just a guy who's been really unlucky early on, and somewhere Ryan Finkelstein, your co-host normally on this, is smiling because he knows that Mets fortune is going to turn around for Lindor at some point soon.
Jose Abreu has a couple more years left. I know that hasn't been good. No power, 1 double. He's 4 for 49 first off. So just putting the ball in play has been rough. No homers, 2 RBI. I know they've had a couple of the pitching hiccups in general, but is Jose Abreu the biggest reason the Astros have the second worst record in the American League? Is it unfair to pin it all on one player?
It might be a little unfair, but I think if you're looking at some of the worst contracts that have been handed out recently, I think that Abreu contract rises pretty quickly up to the top. Of course, Chris Bryant's going to be up there in that whole discussion in Colorado, but I don't think you need to look far for what Abreu has not done in Houston and as well.
On the pitching side with the Mariners, who have no easy objective ahead of them, so to speak, this weekend when they go to Colorado, but sometimes teams fare a little bit better at altitude. Luis Castillo, 0-4. Okay, well, that's not pitching as good against the other pitcher, giving up far too many early runs. 5.82 ERA, but if you look at his expected FIP, fielding independent pitching, right? He's the 3 true outcomes: striking out guys, walking guys, and giving up the home run, closer to a 2.87 xFIP. So is he really one of the best pitchers in the American League West? Yes. Is this just a bad 4 or 5 game stretch? I would say so. And teammate George Kirby, similar deal, 6.64 ERA, but an expected FIP of 3.83 for the Mariners 1-2 combination.
And it feels like that's going to click at some point. Now, whether it'll be on this road trip that the Mariners are getting ready to embark on starting in Colorado, who knows? But I agree with you completely that those 2 guys, they're better than their numbers are showing right now, which is a good thing up in the Pacific Northwest.
Let's jump into some players who might not be better than their numbers. They're playing really well. Are they going to come back down to earth? Let's dig into the numbers exactly, rather than being vague and say, hey, this guy's really good. Jose Altuve is one for you, I think, right? That we've discussed. That's off to a really solid start. And, is he's going to get to 3,000 hits? Let's just talk about 2024 for right now.
Here's the thing to me is that the Astros and that whole AL West right now is just so fascinating. I mean, we haven't even talked about the Oakland A's, who are, playing some decent baseball at the moment. But Altuve's 684 slugging percentage right now versus his expected slugging of 528 is certainly something that I'm watching. I know that. And we've talked about Tyler O'Neill already, and I think that weight that everything is kind of riding on him right now in Boston. That 1.29 OPS, I just don't know if that can keep up, man. What about you?
Well, it's funny with those two guys, I think about how favorable their home ballpark can be, right?
Yeah.
You can hit in a favorable park, doesn't mean you're necessarily going to benefit from it. But I think back to looking at players that have been a little bit unlucky with their home runs. And when you go to their Baseball Savant page, you say, well, how many home runs would this player have hit at this ballpark? And at Minute Maid with the Crawford seats out in left field, you go, oh man, this guy would have 25 home runs by the All-Star break instead of 7. Same thing would be true with the Green Monster in left field. So Tyler O'Neill, maybe benefiting, his swing fits well for Fenway, Altuve at Minute Maid Park. That can certainly be favorable and help a player, not just early on in the season, but an entire year.
Absolutely. And then people, whenever they think of hitting, they'll say Coors, that. And so we got to look at our friend Ryan McMahon, 361 batting average right now, 458 BABIP, highest in MLB right now. Is that something that Rymack has really figured out, that whole 2-strike approach? He's talked about that at length, that he's really changed that swing with 2 strikes. But is it something that he's going to be able to keep up over the year, especially on a Rockies offense that honestly is hurting for people who can put the ball in play right now effectively?
I think a lot of people would be surprised that Ryan McMahon, his career BABIP is only about 318. So you'd say, oh, well, that big outfield at Coors, obviously you're going to benefit from that. And he certainly does, as does anyone who hits there. But in general, that's just obscenely high, right? His BABIP, that's something that no player can possibly sustain. So he's certainly one of those guys you look at and say, oh, maybe he has figured out a couple things. Will he come down to earth just a little bit? Will it still be his first All-Star appearance? Very, very well could be, but with nobody behind him in the lineup. Chris Bryant, as we touched on before, did just go on the injured list today on Wednesday when we record this. So he's still yet to play 162 games with the Rockies, despite signing ahead of that 2022 season. Nolan Jones, as we said, struggling. Who's going to be able to protect Rymack in that lineup will be interesting to see. On the pitching side, guys who have a really strong ERA, but they've gotten a little bit lucky with some fly balls that have not gone out and some traffic on the bases that have not scored. Christian Javier, we talk about him maybe being the new Framber Valdez with his 1.54 ERA, but an expected FIP of 5.41, third highest in MLB.
And, remember that year that Tyler Anderson had with the Dodgers and how that everything, seemed to click? Well, right now that 1.47 ERA, it looks really good. But boy, that FIP that you mentioned earlier, 5.0 right now, an even 5, it does make you wonder exactly how lucky Tyler's getting out there.
His teammate Reed Detmers, who was an early call-up, he was the first guy that the Angels, put on the fast track to the majors, has a career strikeout per 9 under 10, 9.55. Right now he's at 13.5. So he's figuring out a couple things to miss more bats early on in the season. He was a player that I believe I had 10th as the 10th best pitcher in the American League West when writing about the best pitchers. Kind of been, incredibly sneaky good for even people like us that are on the West Coast. There's still those true West Coast teams in California. You don't get to see all of their outings, and sometimes their performances can go a little bit under the radar. So for Reed Detmers, Christian Javier, and Tyler Anderson, 3 AL West pitchers, off to solid starts. We'll see if they can kind of continue with that success that they've been having.
I feel like we talked a lot of AL East and a lot of AL West tonight. So really interested to see where those divisions are going.
Are there other divisions besides the East and the West? Are we missing something?
There's something in the middle somewhere along the way, right? I mean,
to be fair, if you go back and listen to Who's Better Baseball podcast over the last couple of weeks since we restarted this channel and the stream, a lot of AL Central and NL Central discussion, because I think those teams had sneaky good off seasons, and Detroit got off to that great start. Same thing with Pittsburgh. So I think a lot of baseball fans have been paying attention to the Central divisions because it's been really sneaky good play from everyone except the Chicago White Sox, of course.
Yeah, except for the White Sox. Oof.
Yeah. Is there, I did want to ask you before we
Yeah.
get out of here and maybe look ahead to the weekend at some of the interesting matchups. Is there any team in last place right now in their division that you look at and say, you know what, they may or may not finish in fifth place, but I think we're going to see, much better play out of them. And obviously, I think Houston Astros have to be number one on that list at
Yeah.
6-14, right?
Yeah, I think that's the one that you look at and you go, is Oakland really going to finish ahead of them in the standings? I mean, I think it's one of those early season things. I'll be honest, the fact that Miami Marlins are so far behind in the NL East is really a stunner to me. But with all the injuries that they've had and everything else, I think they just may be destined for last place. So I would definitely say Houston. I'm still a little lukewarm on the Cardinals. I still think that they're not. Surely they're not as bad as that, but who knows? What about you?
Yeah, I think Astros have to be number one. And then, after that, uh, as we're kind of discovering here with a lot of these divisions, Cardinals only a half game back of the Reds. So they're both pretty much at the bottom of the NL Central. You like both of those teams to be, relevant in many ways. The Rockies at the bottom of the NL West. We don't think that's going to change. Giants, haven't been terribly exciting at 8-11, but again, they're very much safe from being in the basement of the NL West. The Marlins might be the one team that, despite how bad they've been, the Nationals are still in the division, and they added some veteran guys to that roster that have been playing well. But are they going to stick around? Are they going to get dealt at the trade deadline for some prospects? More likely than not. And then the Mets, I still think they're one of those teams that, despite the fact that they're playing well now after that really rough start, this isn't necessarily supposed to be a year for them. Will new owner Steve Cohen, they're not going to go all in, but are they going to maybe make some shrewd moves similar to what Atlanta did in 2021 and just pick up a bunch of veteran guys and hope to cobble a bunch of players together? Will they do that? That remains to be seen, but it really wouldn't surprise me if the Mets ended up in last place in this division with the Marlins ahead of them.
Well, and what we've seen, as we mentioned Steve Cohen maybe making some sneaky moves along the way, is that just like the Diamondbacks last year, all you got to do is get in and you get hot at the right time. And so I think people are starting to see that if they can just keep close and maybe make some of those moves at the deadline, they don't have to go all in, but they can go in enough that if they think they've got the talent to beat somebody in a short series, hey, it can make all the difference.
All right. Well, this weekend, let's look ahead to some of the interesting marquee matchups. Shout out to Noah in the chat. Appreciate folks that are giving us some love out there, saying good questions. Too early, maybe, to make certain definitive statements. And of course, the Bradley Zimmer truther that's out there. If you know, you know. But this weekend, what are some of the matchups you're excited? And I know me selfishly, going to Coors Field for the Rockies series. Julio Rodriguez, his debut at Coors Field wasn't an all-star in 2021. So he wasn't even there for that. He's off to that slow start. So obviously that maybe dampen things a little bit. We might get snow on Saturday. But my eyes and ears are definitely going to be on the Mariners in Colorado. For me, selfishly, that's who I'm most excited in right now.
All right, so I'm going to go a little bit east on I-70, and I'm heading over to Kansas City. I mentioned those Royals earlier. Knowing the Orioles are coming in, I think that's going to be a really fascinating series on the road to see those two teams go at it. We know what the Orioles have, and I do think the Royals are on the rise in that AL Central, and so this is going to be a really fun one to watch. They've already played in Baltimore, and now they return series in KC.
That's the only disappointing part about that, right? Like, it's still going to be super exciting, but that's the disappointing part, is that they're not going to play again until maybe the postseason.
I agree.
We're getting Witt and Rushman together maybe a little bit too early, but hey, you can't have everything. I do find some interesting matchup in Blue Jays and the Padres. When was the last time Toronto traveled to Southern California? I'm very curious to see what that matchup might be like at Petco Park this weekend.
No, completely agree with you. And then the interesting thing for the Blue Jays is they go to Kansas City from there. So I think that this could be a really interesting road trip for the Blue Jays. Again, coming off that 9-game homestand, as you said, their first one of the year. Now they're back on the road, and two places are going to be a little tough to play. So will they handle it?
And I think maybe the most interesting matchup, we'll see if they can deliver, because they're both making their season debut. The Diamondbacks go to San Francisco to play the Giants. Jordan Montgomery against Blake Snell. You can't write this stuff up any better.
Beautiful.
Two late Scott Boras clients, or rather I should say, well, they were Scott Boras clients at the time. Jordan Montgomery now no longer a Boras client. So I think that will be another one of those fun, interesting matchups where, hey, look, you go to work on Friday, you come home, baseball is going to be on nice and late. That's actually the Apple TV game of the night, one of the two. It's the later game. Texas Atlanta is also sneaky good this weekend. That will also be on Apple TV. So I think we'll have a good weekend of games ahead of us that I know we're both excited for.
Absolutely, man. Bring it on. I mean, the fact that we're into baseball and we can be having these debates, it's a beautiful thing.
And in the chat too, let's go ahead. Are the Dodgers the favorites right now for, I believe that's the Mets series. It could be World Series. Yeah, sure, they're probably the favorites for the World Series. Once you get into the postseason, that is a completely different beast. But if we're just looking at Mets, Dodgers, Yamamoto is going to go on Friday night at Dodger Stadium against a Mets team that is definitely heating up. Who do you like in that series?
It's hard to go against the Dodgers, especially at Chavez Ravine. But I'm also the guy that still thinks, will the Dodgers win 100 games this year? I still think that the NL West is sneaky good. And I do think that there's got to be some kind of injuries that come into play, and we'll see exactly how deep that Dodgers rotation is, especially early in the year.
Very true. All right. Well, you can follow us over on X at Patrick D. Lyons, at KGH23, at Who's Better BB is the Who's Better Baseball account. And Kev, go ahead and plug away some of the things that you're working on. I know you just published a real good story from up there in Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely. On Just Baseball, we did some things to Alejandro Kirk. I'll be writing what I heard in the Yankees clubhouse. They've got the off day tomorrow, so that'll be up likely on Friday as they start their weekend series. And then absolutely make sure you're on the Clubhouse Chatter podcast. I'm bringing you some of the audio that I'm hearing in clubhouses around the league.
If you love these dulcet tones, go get more Clubhouse Chatter. Go ahead and do that. Thank you all very much. We'll see you on Sunday. Kev, let's do this again.
I'm down. Let's do it.
All right, you're not going to be a pinch hitter. We're going to put you in the starting lineup.
Oh, man.
From the get-go. And Ryan will be back. The dude's allowed to enjoy a little vacation on his first wedding anniversary. So congratulations to Ryan. We will see you again on Sunday evening.
See you.